We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast. The German news agency Transocean said today in a broadcast.
Here's another late development, and this news keeps coming in as we're talking here. Here's other information just in from the
Hello everyone, this is Sia. I am the head of Metrotham Khan's security team, and I'm also the owner and operator of SentakuMedia.com, and today I will be talking about 40 years of Gundam in 30 minutes. So this panel is for those that have watched at least one Gundam series or haven't watched any of them at all, and they're curious to know as to what it is about and what more of it there is to watch. And like I said, it's been over 40 years since we were introduced to Gundam, but I figured this would be a good place to start, as I've talked about Gundam before in front of a group of people. So I figured 10 years later there's more to talk about, but I've only given so little time to talk about it. So we are going to break it down into a few areas to allow for enough time to talk about it. And we are going to talk about the Universal Century era, which is like the background you see behind you, which is from the original Gundam series. That's the Universal Century era, or the universe rather. And then we're going to talk about the After Colony era, which is a lot of people might be familiar with if they've watched Gundam Wing. And I'm going to talk about a few other series that have some following, but it's not as big compared to Universal Century or After Colony. And of course, we are going to talk about where you can watch these as soon as you're done watching this panel, or rather after the weekend is over with. So to kick it off, we are going to talk about the Universal Century era. So for those that are not familiar with Gundam, so Gundam got its start in 1979, and it was Yoshiyuki Tomino who had the idea for the series, and he initially wrote books about the story, but of course it was turned into an anime format, which was initially meant to sell a line of toys, and believe it or not, it actually didn't do very well. It actually got canceled before the conclusion of the story, or rather the story was concluded, but because of how bad it was, they just had to make do with what they had and just end it where it needed to end. And it wasn't until a couple of years later it actually picked up some traction and it got popular again. But because of how rushed the first series was after it was canceled, they re-released the show as a movie trilogy, which added some filled in some gaps in the story, the original story as well, which was also some material based on the book that Tomino originally drafted for what we have today in a span of several different series. And of course, the story begins with a 15-year-old boy who goes by the name of Amuro Ray in the year Universal Century 0079, which is also known as the 1 Year War era. And this is a theme you'll see throughout the whole franchise, is that there's usually a young protagonist, usually like between 15 and 20, that has to save space, basically. So yeah, Amuro, he's a techno nerd, and he lives on the colony site 7, but with the Principality of Sion, who is the enemy force throughout most of the Universal Century, he has to evacuate and then save his butt and his friends, but to evacuate. And he pilots a Gundam, and because of how well first he is in technology, he only skips through a few pages of the manual and pilots the Gundam and defeats the enemies that were in front of him. And of course, he eventually has a villain that he comes across every single time, and their rivalry actually lasts for a long time, and he goes by the name of Char Aznable, who also goes by the Red Comet. So he's the main antagonist of the Gundam series. So, following everything going on in the original series, you also have these series to go on that, because, like I said, all the characters you see in the original Gundam series, you'll see them throughout almost all of these series. So, following the success of the original Mobile Suit Gundam series, you also have Zeta Gundam and Double Zeta Gundam, which between both of them, they're 50 episodes each. So that's like 100 episodes of extra stuff to go through, and it's worth it in my opinion. Because like after watching these, I got so excited because of my interest in the original Gundam series, and also I do want to mention that Zeta Gundam does have a movie trilogy that you can buy on rightstuff.com, but I'll talk about where to buy more Gundam stuff in a little bit. But yes, Zeta Gundam has a movie trilogy, so if you want to see the original series, I recommend that. But I got most of my information through the movie trilogy, so that's like a shortcut there if you prefer the movie route somehow. And Double Zeta Gundam was also weird because it has a mixed reception in the fandom because of how weird it is. It's not as serious compared to the other Gundam series, but towards the end it does get serious, so it's actually worth a watch. And also for those who are interested in the movies, they will have some spoilers, or rather previous knowledge of the Gundam entries to understand what's going on. And Char's counterattack concludes the a battle between Amuro and Char, and everything else that's going on in the last rather 10 plus odd years since the 1 Year War. And Gundam NT is Gundam Narrative, which is the most recent Gundam movie that was released. It was released in theaters last year, but it finally got a home video release this year. So that takes place after Gundam Unicorn, which is one of the OVA series you see on your right hand side. And there's also Hathaway's Flash, which is actually a novel, and it was released back in 1989. It hadn't gotten it still hasn't have a translation yet, but there is a movie trilogy planned, and part one of that was going to be released back in July of 2020, but due to COVID-19, it's been postponed, so it'll be a little while longer until we get to see anything of it. And now for the OVAs, which are original video animations, and they're usually like mini-series, not designed for TV, but they're designed for home video release. And of course, there's the Origin, which I actually recommend watching before watching the original Gundam series, because it actually explains what Char's motivation is for who he is throughout the course of the series. And you can watch that on one of the services, which I'll talk about later on in the panel. And it's also on Blu-ray too. So yeah, like I say, you'll find that out very soon. And for the other mediums, you have the 08th MS Team, which takes place during the 1 Year War. And then you have War in the Pocket and Stardust Memory, which between both of them, it shows a little bit more of like the trials and the pains of war. And then also Stardust Memory in particular, it shows the formation of the Anti-Earth Union Group, or the AUG, and the Titans, which basically combines the good and the bad between the Earth Federation Force and the Sion, between the two. So you'll get to see a lot of that in Zeta Gundam, so that it will make a lot of sense. And then Gundam Unicorn, which takes place almost 20 years after the 1 Year War, explains a little bit more about why the colonies are the way they are. So like that's gonna take another video to explain it, but there's even more that not even on this list that that I don't even have time to talk about. But just to give you an idea of what to get yourself into, here it is for the Universal Century era. And also, this is an important character that you'll see throughout most of the Universal Century era, and that's Bright Noah, who is slapping Amuro Ray across the face. And because of that, Amuro got out of this funk he was in because of war and actually made him a hero. And apparently, that's a theme, a theme you'll notice like throughout some of the series, and it's probably a character that we need in some other series, depending on how you see it. But that's all I have for the Universal Century era. And now we're going to go into the After Colony era, which is something that a lot of people are familiar with. Gundam Wing is in that timeline, and it's been 20 years since Gundam Wing aired on Toonami. And it has also been 25 years since it aired in Japan. So 2020 is a golden anniversary. Not really quite golden anniversary, but it's like, considering it's been a quarter of a century since it came out, it's like very unbelievable that we've gotten this far since it aired. But so for the After Colony era, it takes place in 195, which is kind of close to 1995. And actually, you've noticed like the series when they've come out, the years they've come out in, they basically take that into the universe that is set in. So a lot of the themes you'll notice throughout these other Gundam series is that they have the same premise. There's usually child soldiers. They get thrown into war, and they have to basically turn into adults overnight just to solve the problem. And where we have one pilot in the original Gundam series, we have 5 pilots, and they're 15-year-olds who are sent to Earth to stop the conflict in the colonies under Oz, who are the antagonists of the series. And of course, the leader of Oz is Trace Kusanada. And he is a very interesting character, as you'll notice throughout the show. The idea of sending the Gundams to Earth is from the scientists that developed the Gundams, and the pilots, they go by heroes, the main character. Got Duo Maxwell, Troa Barton, Katra Winter, and Chang Wu Fei. They don't know anything about each other, but they will soon enough, and then it's just, the rest is history. And rewatching Gundam Wing a few times, I realized that it basically accelerates all like the first 10 years, maybe first 10 years of the Universal Century era, and cramps it all into 50 plus episodes. So a lot of it probably gets lost in translation, but it will make sense in the end. So after the series, we have Endless Waltz, which concludes the story of the events of Gundam Wing, and there's 3 episodes of the OVA, but it was released in theaters a year later, which has some extra scenes from that wasn't previously shown in the OVA version. So I would recommend watching a theatrical version just to get an idea of what's going on. And for those that prefer reading, there's also Glory of the Losers, which is a retelling of Gundam Wing, which is out now. For those that prefer, reading it right now, or in physical form, that is. It retells Gundam Wing and a little bit of Endless Waltz in there. So if the anime doesn't make sense, then maybe the manga will. But for those that prefer to hunt down old manga, they have the 4 that have asterisks by it. And the reason why I have asterisks by it is because they're out of print. So between Ground Zero, Episode Zero, and Blind Target, they are supplementary stories that takes place before, in between, and after Gundam Wing, and explains a little bit more about the pilots, all the characters in the show, for it to make sense. And we also have G Unit, which is a side story of the events happening during After Colony 195. Like, the main characters are mentioned, but you have totally different characters than what we're used to. So if you are the adventurous types, I recommend hunting these down, and I hope they get re-released soon, because they were originally released between Viz Media and Tokyo Pop. But as far, in 2020, I haven't heard any news of a re-release. And also, for those that are already familiar with Gundam Wing, and have been out of the loop for at least 10 years. There's Frozen Teardrop, which takes place roughly 20 years after the events of Gundam Wing, and you have the five main pilots. Four of them, though, they have clones of themselves, except for Hero. And of course, like I said, that will take another video to explain what's going on. It has not been translated in English, but there is a fan translation of it available. Although this, along with Double Zeta Gundam, this is another Gundam entry that has mixed reception in the fandom. So I'm just putting that out there, just in case it sounds weird. But I actually enjoyed it for the most part. But I think it translates better into a form of animation. Anyway, moving on, we have honorable mentions, and these are series that a lot of people have heard about, but they don't have as big of a universe compared to Gundam Wing or the original Gundam series. And of course, one of that is Gundam Seed, which is what you see on your screen. But there are a couple of others. So we have Mobile Fighter G Gundam, which is totally different compared to all the other series that we've talked about so far. So, as you've probably picked up on, Gundam has a heavy political story background. And G Gundam has a little bit of that, but the premise of it is that we have Domon Kashu, who is seen on the picture to your left in the center. He is looking for his brother, but also he has to fight in the Gundam tournaments for other reasons, which is kind of complicated to explain. I don't have time to explain, but this is like probably one of the one of a lot of people's favorite series that aired on Toonami in 2002, which is a couple of years after we were thrown with a bunch of Universal Century material, and it aired a year before Gundam Wing in Japan. So you got 50 episodes of that, and it takes place in the future Century 94, which is again taking the year that it came out and then using it into and incorporating it into the universe's set year. So G Gundam doesn't have a whole lot. Like, there was a sequel planned to it, but it never happened. And I think there is a manga that is set up to introduce more of the G Gundam storyline, but as far as I know, I haven't heard any updates about it. So I'm like keeping my fingers crossed that one day we'll get something new of G Gundam. And then, of course, the next series I'm about to talk about is Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny, which is actually my least favorite in the franchise. It takes place in the Cosmic Era 71, which is actually a little different. Well, I guess it came out in 2001, so I'm guessing maybe they based it on that. But yeah, so it takes place in the Cosmic Era. It originally aired in 2002, which was like the first modern Gundam series in my eyes at the time, which is probably why it's my least favorite, because a lot of people have this weird nostalgia attachment to anything made in the 80s and 90s. So I think that was the case for myself. But ultimately, I think it was just the character development that killed it for me. So a lot of people, like, this was their first Gundam series, so I respect that, but it's just, I couldn't get into it. Like, maybe one day I'll watch it again just to see exactly what it's all about, but I will put this out there for those that just, want anything and everything Gundam related. So it has aired on TV. I think it aired on Toonami for a bit, and I think the Sci-Fi Channel. And between Seed and Seed Destiny is 50 episodes long, so you got a total of 100 episodes that you're dealing with. And there is supposed to be a movie. Like, almost every Gundam series has had a movie, but it was announced in 2006. But it wasn't until last year that we got some information about it, that it was under development from TM Revolution, who is a singer who's performed the theme song for Seed and Seed Destiny. But of course, with 2020 the way it is, it'll be a little longer before we get any news about a Gundam Seed movie. Now, the next Gundam series that did get like a good reception on the Sci-Fi Channel was Gundam 00, and it takes place in our current era, Anno Domini, or AD. So, in other words, it takes place roughly 300 years in the future. And there are 2 seasons of it, and both between the two, there are 25 episodes. So you got 50 episode which is your traditional amount for almost any anime series, especially Gundam. And it aired back in 2007 originally between Japan and the US. And there's also a movie which I forgot to put on the slide, which is called Awakening of the Trailblazer. That I haven't seen yet because it was at a time when Bandai discontinued releases in the US before Right Stuff picked it up. So that's something of Gundam 00 I haven't watched yet, but it's there for those that want to get the full Gundam 00 experience. And I will add that Gundam 00 was directed by the director of the first Full Metal Alchemist series, Seiji Mitsushima. So if you enjoy Full Metal Alchemist, then maybe you can, get a kick out of watching Gundam 00. So now I've talked about, I'm not even done yet. See, this chart I found on Reddit earlier in the year for those that are stuck in quarantine. This is 14 days worth of Universal Century material that you'll be dealing with. Of course, half of these is not available on streaming mediums, but of course there are physical releases of it. So yeah, if you're up for the challenge, there you go. That's a reference to take into account if you want to watch more or everything of Gundam. So now, where do you watch these? Where do you watch these Gundam shows? So you have YouTube, which is the Gundam Info channel, which is the official YouTube channel for anything Gundam related from Bandai. So I think a lot of their content is on a rotational basis, but they have the English dub and English subs of Gundam Unicorn Re 0096, which is the TV anime version of Gundam Unicorn. Because Gundam Unicorn is actually several episodes long, but they're an hour long episodes, but it's been split up into a TV anime. So if you want your TV anime route, then there you go. And you also have Iron Blooded Orphans, which is the most recent Gundam series that has aired, which is almost on every single platform. That I haven't watched yet because it's just it's on low priority list for me because I have so much going on. I haven't gotten into it yet. I watched the first couple of episodes of the show, but it's not bad. But I do recommend watching it, especially if it's a more modern show. It takes place in a different universe compared to what I've talked about so far. So that's another universe to add to the mix. And there's also Gundam Built Fighters and Divers. So there's two separate series in that area. It doesn't include any of the political mumbo jumbo that I've talked about so far, but I think it's more aimed towards the younger crowd and those that are interested in the gunplot aspect of the Gundam franchise, which again will be another video to talk about. But for those that want a little bit more of options, you have Hulu, which has most of the series available. So you have Gundam Wing, 00, The Origin, the remastered version of it, the OF MS Team, Gundam Unicorn OVA, Iron Blooded Orphans. So you got a little bit more of a choice on there. And also on Netflix, you also have Gundam Unicorn and the OVA of Unicorn and Iron Blooded Orphans. And on Crunchyroll, you have Gundam Build Divers. And now for those that prefer physical releases, you have The Right Stuff, which is now the leading home video distributor of the Gundam franchise. Because, like I said, Bandai, they discontinued home video releases in the mid-2000s. And The Right Stuff picked it up about 10 years ago. So up to this day, they're still releasing almost every single Gundam title there is. And they've actually finally released, or rather re-released Gundam After War X, which is now on Blu-ray. So that's another series that I've actually started watching at one point, and I couldn't find any more of it because it was, at the time unreleased, but I get to support them legally. So yeah, you have every single Gundam entry to buy legally from The Right Stuff. And of course, you can buy them on Amazon, but I prefer Right Stuff because they do have good sales too. So if you the sale type person, then that's the place to go. So thank you for watching. That's all I have to talk about. And like I said, there's more to talk about, but I only have so much time to talk about. And if you're interested in what I have to write about, be sure to check out and also I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sentaku Media. And I will see you at Metrotham Con soon at either Defender Day or on episode 2. But stay safe out there, have fun, and enjoy your new additions to your anime library.